And Missy, you may begin.
Hi, everyone. I hope you're having a wonderful evening. I'm going to be your MC for the night, and you're going to hear me way too much, but I'm going to let Claire do our initial introductions. So take it away, Claire. Claire, I believe you are muted right now.
Missy, would you like to go ahead and get started? And as soon as Claire can join, then we will continue.
Yep, I got it. All right, so you're going to hear from me way too much tonight. I am going to cover topics 1, 3, and 4 tonight. So the first topic is voter registration. Um, let's start with the kind of need to know about voter registration. So the voter registration process, as of July 5th, there are 22.17 million registered voters in California out of a possible 26.9 million eligible voters. And those eligible voters have a number of ways that they can register to vote. So they can register to vote electronically, they can register to vote via the mail, and importantly, same-day registration. So you'll see on all of these slides that we have little exclamation points where there are things that you need to know, and any links that are in the slides will also be available via the slide deck after the end of the session. So in California, the big exclamation point, 16 and 17-year-olds can register. They will then be ready to vote when they turn 18. So if you're already registered to vote, one thing that you should really think about doing is double checking whether or not your registration is current. So you can find out if you're currently registered to vote by checking your voter registration status in a number of different ways. We have some tools here for you to check your registration. And again, even if you have been registered forever, we recommend that you double check. So the tools that you have here, and anytime we have tools for you, there'll be little toolbox icons. So you can find them easily. So this California Secretary of State website is linked here to check your voter status, and also ResistBot, which if you do other work with public policy, we use ResistBot to send out different kinds of legislative alerts. You can also use it to check your voter registration status anywhere in the country. And by doing that, you can either go to the website or text the word check to 50409. So our little exclamation point here, and why you should always double check, is that you need to re-register or update your voter registration if you change your residence, or you change your mailing address, if you change your name, or if you change your political party affiliation. So don't forget to double check. So here are the how-tos. So remember, we have 3 different ways that we can register to vote. So the how-tos of electronic voter registration, just remember that the California Secretary of State website is the primary hub for electronic voter registration. The application is available in 10 different languages, and electronic registration has to be submitted no later than October 21st, 2024, and we'll remind you of those dates. For those who register online, just a reminder that your DMV license number, the last 4 digits of your social, must be included. If you're registering to vote and you don't have a driver's license with a signature on file for the state, then any voter will need to basically get a form in the mail to sign and return to the registrar of voters office, or they won't be registered to vote. So anytime you need additional information, just remember you get kind of rerouted to the California Secretary of State website. And that's true even when you go to kind of a national or the federal government sites like vote.gov, you'll just get rerouted to the California Secretary of State website. It is your hub. So the how-to of mail-in voter registration. Remember, electronic, mail-in, and same day. So the how-tos of mail-in voter registration, basically you can pick it up in person. Paper voter registration applications can be picked up at specific locations. Some of those locations include the library, the DMV, and the US Post Office. But you can also find them at county elections offices. And we have a number of links in these slides to get you to your county election offices, because in addition to the California Secretary of State website, the county election offices and their websites are going to also be very important for figuring out kind of the logistics of voting. So when we're thinking about mail-in voter registration, you can also request by mail. So you can request a paper voter registration application that comes to you in the mail by calling this number, 800-345-VOTE. Vote is 8683, or by filling out a form online at the elections divisions of where? The California Secretary of State as your hub. So our little exclamation point here, the last day to complete a voter registration form and postmark or deliver it to your county elections office is, say it with me, October 21st, 2024. Now, if you didn't register electronically, you didn't get your mail-in registration in before October 21st, same-day voter registration, or known as conditional voter registration, is available for anyone who missed any deadlines in California. And there are two ways to register after the deadline. One, complete the same-day voter registration process at early voting locations, which are open in most counties, on some counties, I won't say most, right, from October 26th. Register on election day at your polling place or vote center. And we'll talk a little bit more about vote centers, right? Traditional precinct-based polling places have been replaced in many counties by vote centers. So the tools that are on this slide that are available to you is a link to find voting locations per county, and a link to find your polling place or vote center. So in some cases those overlap, and others they may not. Now, another important how-to, especially if it's not you thinking about yourself, but if it's you thinking about registering others, is the how-to of registering voters that are new citizens. So new citizens may register to vote online or by mail before, what's that date? October 21st. New citizens, in addition, right, if we're thinking about all citizens registering to vote, you have certain documents, but new citizens should bring their proof of new citizenship to their county elections office, and new citizens can register to vote right up to election day. But all citizens registering to vote for the first time need to have certain forms, again, a driver's license or a driver's license number, and a California identification number, or the last 4 digits of your social security number. So now that you have all of the information that you need, how can you promote voter registration? So you can participate in getting others registered to vote by showing up to select locations that are important, colleges, right? You might set up a table with materials at a university or college or community college in your area. And there you can include registration forms, or included here is a QR code that takes potential voters to the California Secretary of State website. And if you are going to a college or university, you might want to have something free, like food, right? So bagels or cookies, or something to give away to draw people in. Other places you might show up for voter registration, gathering places. So you can send volunteers to places where large groups of people might congregate, malls or festivals or farmers markets. Just make sure to get permission first. And you can include voter registration as part of existing AAUW events. So if you hold an issue forum on an AAUW priority issue that's important to your community, you can also make voter registration part of the pitch at the end of the event. So another way to promote voter registration is something that will be launching in the next week or so, and that's AAUW California's social media campaign. You'll see this come into your inbox, and we're asking you to participate in our social media campaign that will mobilize everyone to get out the vote. So you'll get emails in your inboxes directly to you from AUW California that has information about how to promote Get Out the Vote efforts, deadlines, voter information on your social media platforms so that it goes out more broadly. So through this campaign, all branches can get involved in getting out the vote. It's going to look a lot like the successful social media campaigns that we've had in previous cycles, especially in 2020 and 2022, to promote registration and voting and remind people of deadlines. And you'll get, you don't have to come up with a message. You'll get an image and a message that you can just post on your social media, on your personal or branch social media accounts. And using the hashtags that we suggest will help make our messages trend and get out the vote more broadly in digital space. So that is promoting voter registration. And I will hand it over to myself for topic 2, right? After we think about the regulations for registering and we try to register as many new members or new voters as possible. It's important to know where and how to vote and to get your ballot to the election office. So part 2 or topic 2 is, right, get out the vote logistics. So vote by mail ballots. Okay, so this is important. Since 2020, county officials mail ballots to all active registered voters, usually about a month before the election. Usually, right, you should have them in your inbox and I'm sorry, in your mailbox. These vote by mail ballots will be delivered directly to your house. So how do you submit them? By mail, right? You fill out your ballots and ballot envelope and drop it in the mail on or before election day. Remember that you don't have to have a stamp, right? This is, you just drop it in the mailbox as long as it is postmarked by November 5th and importantly, is received by November 12th, then your ballot will be counted. So vote centers, you can also submit your vote by mail ballots at vote centers. You can drop your completed ballot at any vote center on election day by 8 p.m. or before election day at a vote center. You can drop your vote by mail ballot completed at a county elections office, which we've linked you to several times in these slides, or at an official drop box. So drop your completed vote by mail ballot in any official drop box and avoid fake drop boxes. So fake drop boxes, the one that's pictured here is an official drop box for LA County. Just double check if you use a drop box because there was some issue with fake drop boxes in previous election cycles. I have a picture of one of them on another slide. And then our exclamation point here, there are remote accessible vote by mail options, also known as a ridiculous acronym, RAVBM. But these are really important because if you can't leave your house, right, then you also have remote accessible options. And we've linked you there in case that's something that either you yourself need or that you need to promote to someone else. So vote by mail ballots, a little bit more about how these kinds of function, right? We'll list these as important questions and answers. So if you get a vote by mail ballot, because you will, right? Can you still vote in person? The short answer is yes, right? So that's with a caveat and thinking about how you actually do it. Whether or not you have to surrender your vote by mail ballot to vote in person does vary by county. It depends on that county's participation in the Voter Choice Act or the VCA. So you can learn more about the VCA and check your county status by clicking on the link in this slide. And there's a slide at the very end that has all of these links too, so you don't have to search for them. So another common question, can someone else drop off your vote by mail ballot? So can someone else drop off your vote by mail ballot? Wish I could hear you all. Who says yes? Who says no? Right? The answer is yes. Anyone can return your vote by mail ballot for you as long as they're not paid on a per ballot basis, right? However, you, the voter, have to fill out the authorization section found on the outside of your ballot envelope. Another common question. I don't see a vote by mail ballot in my mail, right? Question mark, what is happening? So if you're registered to vote, you should have one in your mailbox in early October. If you do not, double check your voter registration. Remember, double check your voter registration and your details. And if everything's correct and you still don't have one by October 12th, you should contact your local county elections office. Now, next to that little toolbox, there's a button at the bottom, and I'll point this out a few times. You can track your ballot, and you can track your ballot throughout, and there are links through which you can track your ballot. And so that's important, knowing that most of the balloting now happens as vote by mail ballots. So here is a little more information. Where is my ballot, right? The California Secretary of State offers this as a service for you, right? That was the link on the last slide. This is a way for voters to track and receive notifications on the status of their vote by mail ballot. You can receive notices via email, via text, via voice message, whatever you prefer. And this is the kind of messages that you can get. You can get information about when the ballot has been delivered, if the ballot's returned as undeliverable to the county elections office, when the completed ballot's received by the county, whether the completed ballot has been accepted, or a reason why your ballot couldn't be accepted, and instructions to complete to have the ballot accepted. So you can also get the deadline for the vote for you to return your ballot to the county, right? If the county has not received your completed ballot on time. So again, I've given you a sign up link at the bottom next to the toolbox. So sign up now. So another important question is thinking about making mistakes, right? We all make mistakes. Say you made a mistake. Guess what? It's okay. You have options. So what if you're filling out your vote by mail ballot and you make a mistake? One thing you can do is you can draw a single line through your mistake and make a correction. And in many cases, that is all you need to do. But, right, if you are not sure that that is the correct, line of action and you want to get a new ballot, if it's early enough, you can request a new vote by mail ballot. And you can do that by submitting a request form in person. So you can fill out a replacement ballot form. So we've linked you to the replacement ballot form, and you can return that to your county elections office. And if for any reason you can't physically go to your county elections office, then you can fill out a related form, which is linked here, so that someone else can submit that on your behalf. In some counties, you can submit a request form online. So some counties have electronic vote by mail replacement forms, for example, LA County and Orange County. And so that's a county by county option. You can also contact your county elections office for replacement deadlines and for more information. So remember, the Secretary of State website and your county elections offices are kind of your hubs for voter registration and vote by mail ballot information. So you made a mistake. You can either draw a single line through your mistake, you can request a new ballot, or you can just vote in person. So in some counties, you don't even need to bring the spoiled ballot with you. You just show up and vote. And this is county by county. So again, you might want to check on your county. In other counties, you will have to take the spoiled ballot with you, the ballot with a mistake, when you go to vote in person. So you'll have to take it with you to a vote center or a polling place, give it to the election official, and request a replacement or provisional ballot. But again, contact your county elections office for more information, especially if you're not sure whether or not you have to bring that ballot with you to surrender it if you vote in person. So I've given you a lot of information. So here is your checklist of to-dos for every vote by mail ballot. Okay, so make sure you fill out your ballot completely. Don't forget proposition voting. Make sure you have signed, addressed, and dated the return envelope for the ballot. So it's not just the ballot, it's also the ballot envelope that needs to be signed, addressed, and dated. Vote early to make sure vote by mail ballots are received before the deadline. Remember, They have to be postmarked by November 5th. They have to be dropped off by 8 p.m. on voting day, or but they have to be received regardless by November 12th. So vote early to make sure that they're received before the deadline. If using a Dropbox, make sure it's official, right? Again, here's an official Dropbox. This one is for Orange County. And here is an actual picture of one of the unofficial Dropboxes. So the unofficial Dropboxes were not very bright and colorful in the last election cycle, but keep your eyes peeled for those. And the last on our checklist, track your ballot before and after voting using the ballot tracker that we've linked you to. So a few more get out the vote logistics in addition to vote by mail, thinking about identification and voting in California. So why are we talking about ID? Is ID required to vote in California? In most cases, registered voters in California will not need to show ID in order to vote. However, there are some instances where ID might be requested. So when might you need to show ID? Right? So first, when you register, and all that information is on slide 11. Second, when there's missing information in your voter registration file. So if you're voting by mail, if information is missing, you'll be contacted by your county elections official when your voted ballot is received, and they'll then request required proof of identity before your ballot will be opened. If you're voting in person, prior to getting a ballot at the polling place, you'll be asked to provide an acceptable form of identification before election officials will give you a ballot. So again, check your voter registration status early. And if you get to your polling place, right, or you get a request that you need additional identification, then we've also linked you at the bottom to the types of ID that might be requested. So we've given you a list of acceptable forms of ID. And finally, voting dates and deadlines. So here is a kind of short list of important voting dates and deadlines for 2024. So October 7th and October 8th are coming up very quickly. So October 7th is the day that vote by mail ballots are sent to registered voters. And then on the 8th, ballot drop-off locations become available. October 12th, right, is around that time that you should check with your county elections officials if you've checked your voter registration details and they're correct, but you don't have a vote by mail ballot. So around mid-October. October 21st, most voter registration closes, but you can still register in person on election day. October 26th, vote centers open for early in-person voting and vote by mail drop-off in select counties where you have vote center and extended early voting, and that'll depend on your county's participation in the VCA. October 29th, this is the last day to request a replacement vote by mail ballot if you make a mistake. But again, double check your county offices because October 29th is listed for certain counties, including LA County. So always double check. November 5th, election day, vote by mail ballots have to be postmarked or dropped off as a vote center by 8 p.m. And November 12th, vote by mail ballots have to be received to be counted. So make sure you see the tracking tool that exists. So I'll now turn it over to the amazing Claire, who will cover topic 3, voter education and voter suppression.
Okay, hello everybody, and this is Claire speaking, and I want to let you know that voters know more about the election. The more voters know about the election process, the more they will turn out to vote, and that's what we will talk about. It remains important, especially when the political system is like nowadays, when people are feeling very frustrated or disempowered. So if voters know, besides knowing more about the election, they will turn out to vote. If they know more about the candidates, they will choose leaders who reflect their concerns and views. And if they understand the issues, what they're voting for or against, they'll feel more confident and have more interest in voting. That's what we found out. So this is our power to help voters understand how voting impacts their daily lives, and you can help educate voters by using the various forms that we're going to talk about now, especially candidates forums, and through creating the voter guides, or be sure to read your AEW public policy content that comes monthly. And there'll be information about the ballot measure positions that AEW is focused on. All right, first of all, voter candidate forums. Times have changed. Sometimes you can have a candidate forum in person, or you can do it on Zoom, just like this kind of meeting. And I've been to both kinds in recent weeks. And in California, the other thing that's important, the top two format for is the way you vote for Congress, congressional seats, and for statewide offices. And so that limits the number of candidates. And local elections, however, like for the city council, may have more than two candidates. And one of the best things you can do is partner up with other groups for a forum. For instance, League of Women Voters always has plenty of candidate forums on every election going on for the particular election cycle. And you can check out the AEW National Election Resources to help you organize a forum. And you will get that link at the end of the program. Next, we have prepared some voter guides for select California congressional district races that we are really focusing on, that you can share at candidate forums, on your website, into Facebook, your newsletter, or any other event where you aren't endorsing the candidate. And you can see the public policy news for links. And the branch can use the template to create a guide for your local congressional races if you are not in one of the ones that we have already made a form for you that you can use. And it can be for your particular congressional district, or your state assembly person or senators, or even for local forums. But only if you keep to the statements that we have set up on the template that are AEW positions on these various ideas. And remember that these voter guides are not to choose a candidate, but to educate voters on the positions that are relevant to the AEW mission. Even so, the last important thing is that only 501c4 may share out these candidate voter guides, not if you're a C3. And the reminder, or the little note here, is that the C3 can focus on the public policy priorities in the election, and see the news and the public policy news in the August vision. And I think it's going to be in September and October too. It's in this September and will be in the October. Okay. And this is what a voter guide looks like. And if you see in the top right corner, you can identify the congressional district or the local election that you are that this voter guide is for, because you can change that. And on each side there will be, this is, since we've set these up for the congressional elections, it will most likely, in the ones that we have selected, a Democrat versus a Republican, so you can put their names up where it says Democrat and Republican, but you're only looking at them for what their positions are on the AEW statements, which you can see in the middle. And what you do is there's in each of those little boxes next to each statement, like the Passing Paycheck Fairness Act, you can put what the position is of the candidate. And it can be support, or they oppose it, or they have sort of a mixed they've spoken one way and then spoken another way, or you have no information about that person. So all of those are various ways that you can, various statements that you can put underneath the person's name. And at the bottom here, we don't have, you can't see it on this slide, but at the bottom is more information about all these different kinds of ways you can talk about the, write in about the candidate. All right, so we want to make sure that you know that the voter guides are statements that we have picked for the selected that we are focusing on, come from the AUW's It's My Vote 2024 Voter Issue Guide, which you can get by going online to the AUW national website. And all of these candidates' positions must be researched. Like you can use these different kinds of ways to find out statements or speeches from the candidates by looking at their voting records, by going to their websites for candidacy and seeing what they say about the different positions on different issues. Or you can find direct quotes from the media, especially from the newspapers. And I talked about the campaign website, so the other campaign pieces that the candidates will put out. Or, as I have done many times in the past, I call the candidate's office and ask them to let me know what their positions are on different topics. And then once those is complete, you can distribute it at one of your candidates' forums, or if you're going to any other kind of candidate thing. But you can't do it, as it says, at the vote centers or polling places. And you must remember that you are not being partisan for a candidate, but you're only letting people know that what their positions are that AUW is really focused on. Okay, so the next is we have very concerns about the propositions that are coming up on this election. And there's many propositions, but the ones that we are most interested in are Proposition 2, which authorizes bonds for public schools and community colleges. Proposition 3, which enshrines the right for the same-sex couples to marry in California, in the California Constitution. And number 4 is that authorizes bonds for parks and environment and energy and water, which we need, as you know, in California. And Proposition 32 is our last one, that we are specifically interested is raising the state minimum wage to $18 an hour. Yeah. Okay, and there's lots of ways you can bring these up. As you know, there are different kinds of proposition nights where somebody who is very knowledgeable will go over all the propositions. But for you as a branch, you can just work on these 4 propositions as the most important ones. You can write letters to the editor about these various propositions. And I think that is a good way. And be sure to put it in your branch newsletters that these are the 4 propositions that we are really working on to get over the tip, make the tip, so that they become the actual legislation. Okay. So the next thing I want to remind everybody about is there's a lot of misinformation that's going on nowadays, especially about major elections, but also in the narrow ones. And one way that suppression is it comes across is that there's both physical hindrances and there are also rule restrictions in many states. Fortunately, California is better off, but in some places, well, you've heard about it on the news that they've made such a distance to different voting places that it means extended waits. So there are not enough voting places, and so there's a long line of wait for during high voting hours. Also, there's other states that have very stringent rules for mail-in ballots, and they are not well publicized. So people are constantly trying to vote by mail, but are having difficulty getting their ballot counted. And in California, as Missy explained before, the big issue in 2020 was fake drop boxes. There was a lot of trouble in various counties about people putting their ballots in the fake drop boxes and how were they gotten and counted. All right. In 2024, you have to be very careful about misinformation, and the National Voters' Rights Act, Civil Rights Act, and National Voting Regulation Act makes it very unlawful to stalk, threaten with criminal prosecution, disseminate false information, or make certain phone calls. In California, there's a big list of regulations that talk about actions that you can't do against poll workers or poll watchers or on doing campaigns near voting sites. And there's also actions for election officers to use to safeguard against voter intimidation, which is another big problem that occurs. Now, ways that you can check out for mis and disinformation. One is PolitiFact, or besides your newspapers that talk about what were lies or misleading and so on like that you find in your newspapers about rallies or town halls. But every day there are groups one is called PolitiFact, which is a rather well-known one because you've seen the thing about the pants on fire, and the other one was Pinocchio's nose getting longer and longer. Anyway, so there's PolitiFact, and then there's factcheck.org, which is a source from the Annenberg Public Policy group. And then last, NPR has spends a lot of time on fact checking both online and on air. Now, the next thing I'd like to bring up to you is that we can overcome or triumph over suppression by urging the simplest and the first is urging voters to get registered and get their ballots counted. And if you are willing, you can do phone banking, you can do texting, you can do on-the-ground canvassing. But another thing that's very popular nowadays is to write letters or postcards to less frequent voters to make sure that they get out and vote in states that have problems with getting people to vote. And one of the resources is Reclaim Our Vote. Another is, you've probably heard of these, Vote Riders and Vote Forward. And those are all postcards or getting letters and getting names of people to send the letters to. But you must remember that none of these really go for a candidate. They just want people to get out and vote. But you must maintain the AUW's nonpartisan policy. Don't support or oppose any partisan candidate or political party. Only get people out to vote. Okay. And last, there are two more things that we're asking you to do. One is every time you vote for women and girls, you vote for women and girls every time that you take action on legislation in Congress or in the California legislature. So you should make it a habit to contact your Congress member or California Assembly members or senators. And the National AEW 2-minute activist is one way to get to your congressional people. And and that's been empowering women, as you know, since 1881. Anyway, you sign up for the 2-minute activist. And in California, we ask you to sign up for AEW's legislative action alerts. And there's the link here will be at the end of the list, on the list at the end of the program too. So be sure that you sign up for this. Is a excellent way for you to be a voter, even though it's not election time. So, okay, that's for me. And now Missy will continue talking about community collaboration and having difficult conversations, and we know that's difficult. Okay, Missy.
Thanks, Claire. So I'm going to drop 2 things in the chat before I go on to that, and that is just reminding you to sign up for our legislative action alerts in California. And we still have 3 priority bills sitting on the governor's desk that need to be signed this week before September 30th. So here is also our petition site at ResistBot. And so back to our regularly scheduled program, topic 4, thinking about community collaboration. So in this section, we're going to kind of pick up on a few themes that have already been covered to think about getting out the vote as collaborative work, and then consider some of the challenges that we might face in attempting to collaborate with others in this increasingly polarized political world. So here, right, in topic 1 and topic 3, we've touched on collaborating with groups and organizations within our communities and how important that is for getting out the vote. It helps us to do things like build capacity, to share workload, and to reach potential voting audiences who may not otherwise be reached. And I want to point out some, some good comments in the chat about thinking about high school students, right? We had a really great question in the Q&A. So when you're considering your collaborative work, you should ask yourselves that big question in bold white there: who in your community may need get out the vote information the most? And I have some demographics up here, right? So in California, demographic assessments indicate that the majority of unregistered adults are members of Latinx communities. So overall, voter registration and voter turnout efforts should target not only Latinx communities, but younger people and those who are less affluent, right? So continuing with community collaboration on the next slide, thinking about how we can reach out to these potential voters. So as Claire noted, there are organizations that connect you with less likely voters. These organizations tend to ask for your help outside of California, and that is good. But if you want to stay local, you can use your own communities and networks to register voters and provide them with information. Once you identify who you might target locally, say younger voters, I've given you 3 things to do. I said research, connect, create, right? Research, do some digging to figure out which organizations in and outside of your community are already doing get out the vote and voter education work. Start small scale, right? You can talk to people. If you don't have a lot of time, you can talk to family members and neighbors or people at the farmer's market or the library. You can check the local newspapers and online forums, what's happening at your local university. When you connect, how can you share information and tasks to reach a wider audience? Reach out to local community groups and organizations and businesses and educational institutions. So for instance, if you are thinking about going to a university or college campus, at least right now, some of the CSUs have voting coordinators on university campuses. So you can collaborate with people who are already doing the work on those campuses. Ask existing groups what they need most relative to get out the vote so you can combine forces and create, right? While some organizations may already have active campaigns, you might also have ideas for where, when, and how to run registration drives, to knock on doors or show up at community events. So thinking about community collaboration more broadly and how we can really make connections between organizations so that we're not repeating work and we're actually working together. So as you're doing this work, there's a lot of importance in, of course, engaging difference, right? You're moving out beyond probably the groups that you're already working with. And so part of doing this work is having conversations across difference. And sometimes that might entail differences in life experience, in worldview, or right in party affiliation, in ideological positions. So I know I can't see your hands because this is a webinar, but in case you, if you are still with me, how many of you feel a little nervous about engaging in conversations when you know that there are political and other differences that might exist between you and the people that you're talking to? Okay. Some people feel a lot of stress about it. According to a 2023 Pew study, the majority of Americans actually find it stressful to talk politics, especially with people they disagree with. And around 6 in 10 US adults say having political conversations with people they disagree with is frustrating, right? You also have things like politeness and other norms, especially within families or in workplaces, that might lead you to not know if you can or should engage with people, just in case there are political and other differences. So, it can be stressful. You're not sure. But research has shown that engaging differences constructively leads to new insights and better decisions, and that's within any group or organization. So having safe conversations across difference leads to better outcomes. We have research that shows us that this is the case in, democratic conversations, in research teams, and on juries. So engaging differences constructively is essential to not just kind of building community, but to the democratic process, from choosing elected officials to creating meaningful legislation. And it's essential to achieving what we might think of as a more perfect union, because critical assessment of different perspectives and evidence is practically necessary to making well-informed decisions and achieving consensus. So, we only have a short time left, so I'll give you kind of the brief of this. But thinking about perceptions of difference in a polarized world, when you have conversations across difference, it's already difficult, but it becomes more difficult when we encounter these kinds of spikes in political polarization. In an environment like this, divergent political positions and party affiliations start to be thought of as groups of people who have fundamentally different kinds of beliefs. But that's not really true, right? Sometimes a belief in difference itself and the repetition of the idea that we are fundamentally different leads to the perception of difference. That can create deep rifts between people that don't necessarily need to exist. And the perception of difference alongside these increasingly kind of specific kind of sources of information, consumption of different facts also leads to tangible differences in worldview. And in any case where someone's worldview splits, you're basically dealing with the potential for cross-cultural misunderstanding and miscommunication, because everyone's starting from different facts and believe that they themselves are different from other people. So that impacts you whether or not you're talking about politics. And it impacts your ability to talk to people about issues and solve problems and collaborate with each other in our homes, in our workplaces and communities, even when we're not talking about politics. So the perception of difference alongside the consumption of those different facts leads to a divergence in worldview and miscommunication. And so I'm giving you a kind of a nonsensical example here, but this is just thinking critically about then how do you start to engage? So one of the impacts that we have is a lack of baseline assumptions. So I use this example quite a bit. The monster under my bed has fangs. Seems nonsensical. Cute monster, right? Now, if I say the monster under my bed has fangs, And my point was to tell you about me being surprised that that monster has a fang. If you don't believe in monsters, we end up getting stuck on the reality of monsters rather than my issue if I want to talk about fangs. So we have to start from the same set of baseline assumptions. We all have to believe in monsters in order to talk about the fangs. And that means that we all have to understand what our starting point is in order to be able to have meaningful conversations. We have to work together to find ways that we can talk to each other, to reach consensus positions and make good choices. And a good focus area then is learning to reflect on, monitor, and shift our everyday conversations so that we can actually make that happen. So I'm going to give you two quick sets of tools, right? The first set of tools is thinking about if you are having any issue having conversations across difference, then step one is kind of reflecting and monitoring as important skills. So before you begin to look at others, critically look at your own approach to political conversations, especially when they're happening across difference. So how do you approach an explicitly political conversation? So I'm going to give you another nonsensical example, but one that many Americans get very heated about, and that is the claim that a hot dog is a sandwich. Right? So many debates about this. If you engage in a conversation about this claim, are you looking to win a fight at all costs? Right? Are you looking to just make your voice heard? Or are you looking to make a point in a way that it will be heard by the most others, right? Or to educate others about a particular issue? So we tend to be oriented towards an agonistic way. So a way of engaging in political conversations that are about winning, right? That conversation. But if you can think of political interactions a little more broadly and think of them not just as winning or voicing an opinion, but doing other work, right, to persuade or educate, then you can actually think about doing them a little differently. So I've given you two kinds of ideas of how you would phrase things if your goal is to express your opinion, right, or win an argument, versus if your goal is to kind of move towards establishing consensus around this very difficult topic about hot dogs as sandwiches. Avoiding political conversations is also not an answer. And if you tend to do that, this is another self-reflection point. You should ask yourself why. And challenge yourself to engage and think about how you respond to certain words and phrases. What assumptions do you make when someone says X, Y, or Z, right? And that's to deconstruct your own underlying assumptions so that you can then move forward from a point of common ground. So here, this is another just set of tools to think about having conversations across difference, to bridge those differences in conversation. So we want everyone to feel more empowered to speak up when you disagree, misunderstand, or hear something you find problematic. But we also want to practice speaking up in a way that doesn't perpetuate polarization by trying to make connections and build common ground. And so here are a few key communication skills that you can apply to specific situations that help to kind of shift the way that political conversations happen so that you can avoid recreating systems of difference and of polarization as you're trying to kind of bridge those gaps. So those communication skills, active listening, asking questions instead of asserting, using careful word choices, telling personal stories, and avoiding scripted talk. And these can be applied in different ways to the first two together: identify differences in assumptions and considering your audience, right? Active listening and asking lots of questions, understanding where people are at, and then doing the last three, right? Foregrounding shared identities, foregrounding shared issues, centering storytelling, telling stories about things is actually a really accessible way to get people involved in a conversation, and is actually more useful in the current political environment because people have ideas about competing facts, but don't necessarily have competing stories, right? Experiential knowledge. And engaging in repeated conversations, right? You might not change someone's mind in one conversation, but it might have to happen in repeated conversations over time. So I hope that gives you some tools for thinking about deconstructing your own assumptions and expectations to engage with each other across difference. And I hope you have all the tools to register people to vote yourself. But last thing, I want you to just take a moment and think about what you can do right now. Can you take a few minutes to just jot down some notes? What are 1 to 2 goals you will try to achieve as an individual and 1 to 2 goals you'll try to achieve as a branch to address any one of the topics that we talked about today? So consider your action plans, jot down some notes. Feel free to drop your ideas in the Q&A so we can share out. Feel free to send me an email so that we can share what you're going to do with other branches and individuals. The goal is for all of us to leave this webinar with a concrete plan for how we can get out the vote and educate others in a polarized world. And I answered many of your questions in the chat, so I'll turn it back over to Julika.
All right, I think are we at the end? Missy, do you think that we're in conclusion at this point?
We are absolutely, I want to respect everyone's time. So we're at 1 hour. And if anybody has any questions, I'll also drop the public policy email into the chat so you can email me personally.
Right, I would say as you leave the meeting, as the attendees leave, there will be a survey that will pop up, and some of the initiatives or thoughts that Missy had will be in that survey. We really want you to respond if you can, because it helps us both improve our processes and our webinars, and it gives us some insight into what you would like for us to present. So with that, you may leave. This is the end of the webinar, and we thank you so much for coming.